Good day, gentlemen. James Marshall here. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the concept and the application of the sexual market, and also be looking at some metaphorical ideas of sexual wealth gap, and hopefully adding some more nuance and detailed understanding of what can appear to be just a blanket broad scope definition and description of the way that coupling between men and women works. Now, the first thing to understand is that there's no such thing as a single sexual market, right? Where you've got, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio and some Saudi princes at the very top, and then everyone else funnels in underneath in some kind of, hierarchy that ends up with the least dateable person on the planet at the bottom. The reality is that, yes, sexual markets exist, but there are literally millions of them. Right, and that has always been the case with humans, right? So throughout human history, we were divided up into subgroups, into tribes, into villages, into societies. And within those groupings of human beings, there would indeed be hierarchies and different correlations of the way that men and women hooked up. And then, also throughout history, there have been intersections between various sexual markets. So what I mean by that is, unless you happen to be Amish, right? If you live in an Amish community, it's quite possible that this is completely self-enclosed, that there is no mobility in or out of that society, and so dating and mating and marriage and children and so on all happens within this one group. But the reality of the modern world is that we certainly live within small subgroups, but we're living often in broad-scale societies where there are hundreds of thousands of different types of groupings within a given city, for example. And what this means is that if we are to look at this concept of the sexual market, it can be useful conceptually, but there is big problems when we look at it as a broad scope thing that covers all of humanity. Because inevitably then, if you are ranking yourself or allowing influencers or various pundits to describe your rankings for you, then you'll inevitably fall short of the the entire population, because there's going to be someone at the top or some small group at the top who are hotter, richer, taller, and so on, and then you're going to slot somewhere in low beneath this. The perception that we can have if we describe this as a sexual market is that women are, again, looking at things from a broad scope and seeing all the men that are available and only gravitating towards this mythical, whatever it is, 5-10% of most attractive males in the entire population, or in the population of the entire city or the entire country or whatever. And this is not, in reality, the way that things work between men and women, because at the end of the day, it always comes down to an individual choice of one woman and one man. And okay, it may be the woman who makes the decision to allow things to progress initially, or it may be the man, but okay, often it is women as the gatekeepers to, the romantic liaison initially at least. But at the end of the day, we're coming down to if we want to have kind of financial or market analogies of a single salesperson, this is you with your product, going up to a single potential customer and doing your pitch. And then that single customer decides yes or no or maybe. And then if they decide a maybe or a yes, then the possibility happens where you are totally viable within the sexual market of that single woman's, desire in life. So my initial point is that it is actually very dangerous to attach an ideology to your sexuality, to a broad scope description of society, to what ultimately is personal exchanges. I'm not saying that the political, demographic, financial, and many other metrics that are outside of, let's say, your control don't affect things. Okay, that would be naive to say that. Of course, there are certain markers of success or of attractiveness that tend to attract mates, and men that have more of these will often have the possibility of more options than the men who have less of these. But when we look at it in this very rigid or very kind of cynical or nihilistic position of it's just about the metrics, and if you don't come up to certain levels of arbitrary metrics, then you are out of the market, then you're out of the market, right? Because the reality is that so many men actually withdraw themselves from the sexual market. And the reality for almost everybody is that at points in your life, you will be out of the market, right? If you're in a relationship, you're out of the market, let's say happily. Right? You've done your trade and you've invested in a relationship, and the two of you are now no longer seeking mates, and so therefore the sexual market is more or less irrelevant to you. Okay, so you'll be out of the market during that period. And for men and for women as well, but definitely the statistics seem to say that men will typically spend longer periods alone, being single, that if you're a man who is single and not actively trying to date, then you are out of the market, right? Because if you are not approaching women, not having any luck on the apps, not working on your social world, or not creating opportunities where people may come into your life, then you can be completely out of the market, right? So you can be someone who is just on the shelf, literally invisible, and unfortunately a lot of men will spend large periods of their life in that situation. Now, that would be okay if it was like being temporarily unemployed, right? So if we look at this in terms of the financial markets, there is definitely wealth gaps out there. It's pretty obvious that some people are born to sweet delights, some are born to endless night, some have massive advantages from family wealth, intelligence, connections, the country that they're born in, luck playing a big part in terms of, if they were in the right place at the right time, or they chose to get into a profession that was popping and was profitable and so on. And then there's a bunch of things that are outside the individual's control in terms of the economy and the price of crypto and, demographic shifts and changes in the way that certain career paths used to be completely safe and ones that you could rely on for most of your life, and now they're not. They've been made redundant and changed and so on. So there are all sorts of, broad scope patterns and market forces at play that are outside the individual's scope of changing. But if we were to look at, healthy wealth or success mindsets, there are kind of two options that we can play with. If you weren't born into extreme wealth and privilege and, things set out for you, then what are your choices? One is to look at the market and say that it's unfair and you can't win. And there would be, a legitimate case for that. And for some people, it's completely true, right? Like if you're born in, North Korea, born under an authoritarian regime or in abject poverty, and you have low intelligence and don't have enough nutrition to, form your brain and so on, like there can be things where people are kind of fucked from day one, and it would take monumental efforts or amazing luck, synchronicities or whatever for that person to be able to move themselves out of that position. Some people are in those positions, and that's obviously terrible and sad. But then there are large portions, particularly in the Western world, of populations where if I was to look at things as the game is rigged financially or in terms of success and wealth, there's no point in trying because the odds are stacked against you, and therefore I'll give up. You could make an argument for that, right? You could explain it all away on external forces. And it's not that you shouldn't necessarily have the odd complaint about those external forces, about whether it's corrupt officials or inflation or various things that are making people's lives difficult. Okay, that sucks, and we can't always grin and bear it, but we do have to bear it, right? We do have to operate within it, because if we really give up, unless we have the luxury of generous parents or something to just kind of deal with you for the rest of your life, then bowing out of the market means poverty and destitution and a very difficult and shit life. Most people don't do that. They do engage with the markets, with career, with trying to deal with money, with trying to improve their physical situations and so on. And therefore, then there are certain types of mindsets and behaviours that will be of benefit or not. Right? So there will be people who understand what a liability and an asset is, who will start to try and accrue wealth, who will try to minimise perhaps their expenses, to leverage their location, to figure out building skills where they can, double their wage from just the minimum wage to, okay, something which is now allowing me to put a little bit away, to work on understanding how investments work, to possibly move into, at some point, maybe starting their own kind of business or entrepreneurship where they can, over time, if they have mindsets where this is possible, it's not easy, and there can well be complete failures along that journey, but keeping those mindsets and the activities of people who are effective in mind will tend to lead to you being in a much better situation than if you'd been holding the belief that it's not fair, the game is rigged, and why bother, so therefore I'll give up. If we take this over back into the sexual market, unfortunately, a lot of men, and particularly the younger generation, so what are they now, Zoomers, I think, or Generation Alphas are coming up, but, guys who are 18 to 25-ish, for many of them, unfortunately, they have allowed these particularly kind of nihilistic, sometimes black pill types of ideologies to give them an excuse to give up. Statistics say that 45% of men age 18 to 25 have never approached a woman they didn't know. Never, right? In all of their years, they have never, walked over to someone in a party, said hello to someone in a cafe, waved and smiled and given a compliment to someone on the street. They have never done that, right? And as a result, they are inevitably out of the sexual market, right? Because there is these certain kind of base metrics which, until you activate them, literally nothing happens. Okay, for women, if they are of some level of attractiveness, they have an advantage in the sense that they can be kind of passive, or they can just be present somewhere. If they're at least socially out there in some kind of sense, then typically some men will make advances on them. And so, okay, often women don't need to initiate and don't need to approach. We could say that's unfair. We could say that things should be differently. But if it's at a broad scope level, we can't change societal level behaviours. We can't change all women's behaviours. And for whatever variety of reasons, we're in the situation where it is the man's prerogative to make most of the initial advances, if not all of them. And so if you're a man who is unable to do that, then you have taken yourself out of the market. It wasn't female hypergamy or all the alpha males stealing the women off you, women monkey branching to other guys, or any of these kind of broad scope ideas that often men and pundits are saying is the problem. At the root cause of it, it's like if there is no action, then there is no reaction. If there is no approach, then there is no possibility of you joining the market. So it is really important that just as we take responsibility for our health and our wealth, our well-being and various other metrics and areas in life, even though there are, of course, all sorts of adversarial forces out there, there is fierce competition in all realms, there are difficulties and vicissitudes that you are going to have to face. We don't really feel, at the base level, we don't feel like we have a choice because we have survival, the fear of not surviving pushing us, which is away from pain motivations. And then hopefully we have towards pleasure and success and fulfillment motivations in these areas of our life. And it is really important that we install that when it comes to our personal relationships with women. Now, there would be a counter argument that no, that's not true, it's not worth it, women are not worth it. And this is a common refrain that is thrown around now in the kind of manosphere, a lot of outgrowings of the original men's movements of pick-up artists and self-development. What I've seen is, because I've been in this industry since more or less the beginning of it, and I've seen that there has been a crash of the wave of hope on scale for men. In the early days when I was first learning about this and then teaching it, there was almost no discussion of politics, of gender politics, of sexual market value particularly. There was some investigation of evolutionary psychology and understanding of certain status triggers and the way that, let's say, general hierarchies between men and women might work. But it was really based on the personal proactivity of the man, what he could learn, what he could do, what he could become, so that he could, date and attract higher quality mates. And there was a swell of enthusiasm and hope and action that happened around the world, at least within this, kind of small realm of the guys who are looking into pickup artist techniques or learning seduction. But it was millions of men throughout the, let's say, 2000s through to the mid, 2010s or whatever we're at now. And that has seemed to tail off in recent years. And in its place, in this vacuum that has appeared, has risen different other, much more, I would say, cynical and reductive, simplistic ideologies, actually, which attempt to explain things at broad scale. This would be, the red pill and the black pill movements, the discussion of very, very rigid ideas of what makes a man attractive and not, based on, 3 or 4 kind of often unchangeable metrics. And although, of course, there are grains of truth and there are possibly even broad-scale truths in looking at the patterns of what's happening between men and women globally, or let's say at scale in the Western world, again, if we hold on to this as a reason why things cannot work, then it means that the ideology has robbed you of your own personal journey. And this is extraordinarily dangerous, I think, particularly for the younger generation, to decide in advance, for guys where half of them have never spoken to a woman, where, 60% of men in those brackets are single for long periods of time compared to women, which is 30-odd%, that if you give a man or a person an excuse and a reason to give up, and you create a broad scope theory about it, and you can explain it, it sounds digestible, let's say, then you are robbing that man of his personal choice to go out there and figure it out for himself. So the first thing I want us to be aware of here is that, as I said, in the real market, the market of finance and career and so on, most people don't really think that there is an option to bow out of it, to boycott it, to give up. Some people do. If you're in a country where you can sit on social security benefits, or you've got a parent who'll put up with you in their basement, or you find some very base level, menial work that will allow you to just survive. Okay, people survive however they survive, but it's not going to be the most fulfilling life, obviously. When it comes to the sexual markets, right, remembering, and this will be of assistance to start thinking of them as kind of not infinite, but literally millions of different markets. But if we decide that as a man that you're not going to engage with that because it's too hard, it requires huge amounts of effort for little return, and if you do even succeed, then there's all this horrible stuff that's waiting down the line for you, because women always, and these often kind of red pill truisms, that women will always monkey branch to another partner that's better, that they are inherently hypergamous, in that they are always going to transfer on to the better option, that nice guys will not be rewarded for any kind or positive behavior, and that something, divorce, you lose all your shit, your children are taken off you, and then they become trans. There's these very horrific end storylines that are sold as kind of inevitable. And I'm not naive, right? I've been in this industry for over 15 years. I've seen the fallout of men who were too nice, who put up with shit behavior, who got married to the wrong woman, who didn't sign prenups, who were cheated on, who were doormats, who stayed in toxic or sexless or loveless relationships for years, sometimes decades. Like I've seen and heard it all, because in my line of work, my clients tell me everything, and I've seen all the permutations of what is possible. So I'm not naive, and I'm not saying that that you just need to find a nice gal and get married and you'll live happily ever after. But on the other side, I will say that if you don't engage with women at all, or your dating life is something that you don't take proactive control over, then we definitely know what the negative effects of that are going to be. If a man from 18 to 25 or any age range chooses not to engage with women, because it is a choice, right? It's an apathetic or a passive choice, but it's a choice nonetheless. If he chooses this, then it means from 19 to 24, as an example, he was alone. He was sexually frustrated. He wasn't feeling love and intimacy. He wasn't connecting. He wasn't facing his fears and building his confidence in the face of adversity and inevitable rejections and barriers that come along the way. He wasn't building his masculine projection of intent or sexuality, right? And all sorts of other correlating skills and benefits that would come from putting effort into it in that period. Whereas if he did, let's say, he started doing that at 18 or 21 or whenever he starts really getting into that, yes, there will be a inevitably difficult beginner's phase, right? And that's what I take guys through when I'm taking them on workshops. I'm trying to speed us through that beginner's hell of like the first 50 to 100 approaches. And when we say approaches, like we say that because that's the word that's been used since the dawn of this industry. But, it probably should have been called something else early on, but that's what it is. But what is that? It means interfacing with a woman. It means meeting somebody. It means talking to a stranger. It means rolling up as that salesman of your own product, which is your sexy self, and presenting it to individual markets, which is individual women. And then seeing if my sales technique needs to be improved, or if I just need to cold canvas enough people, I need to go and knock on enough doors to make a sale. And look, if you're a guy who's thinking in terms of I want to be, let's say, churning through a lot of women, I want to be getting lots of one-night stands or getting lots of sexual adventures, then in the initial stages it may seem like the metrics don't stack up, and it's like that I have to do hundreds of hours of practice, or let's say hundreds of impressions with different people, different women, and then I need to go on X number of dates for that to translate into a sexual experience, and then we say goodbye, and then we do that again and again and again. Yeah, for a lot of guys that will be too much effort, and it won't really align with what their actual needs are. Now, of course, at some point in a man's life, that is probably going to be something that he would wish to explore at least, whether or not he does. And as someone who's certainly explored that type of lifestyle in various cycles throughout the years, I know that it has a lot of excitement and sexual variety and all sorts of fun stuff to it, but it's not generally an end in of itself, right? Like, we don't learn the arts of communication, seduction, cold approach, dating, sexual skill, necessarily so that we remain perpetually single and every day we need to go out and spend an hour approaching and an hour on a date to feed this endless kind of pickup addiction or whatever. It's more looking at it like I need to develop a skill set and a degree of confidence and competency when it comes to the opposite sex in order to have relationships of any type. So if that means on the front end that I need to invest a large amount of time and effort over, let's say, a relatively small length of time, then that is ultimately worth it. Because what that means is once you do have this capability, it is like, you can get rusty, you can feel more and less social and more and less confident. Confidence is not a static state. You don't just hit it one day and you feel confident forever. But when you have enough reference experiences, or you have had sex, you've had some relationships, you're used to the process of going on dates, you understand the general steps that it takes at the end of the date to come in and make something happen and lead to the bedroom. And particularly if you have competency sexually, right? Because this is one of the hacks that certainly puts you ahead of the alphas or much of the competition, if we're only trying to line ourselves up against these immutable characteristics of looks, height, race, money or status, for example, that there are things that can shift your market value. Absolutely. It is not set in stone. You are certainly not yet. We're not at birth printed with our, you are alpha, you are beta, brave new world style or whatever. Many of the metrics which we think are extremely important are not nearly as important as other metrics, which I'll discuss shortly, which ultimately are the ones that a woman is going to decide whether she wants to be with you and, importantly, if she wants to continue to be with you. So why is it worth it? Because unlike, the market, it's unlikely that you'll have been, studying very hard or working very hard, and then one day a single thing happens where you get a promotion that 10x's your income, or where you go from one socioeconomic bracket to a class above basically instantly, where one person just turns a key for you and then the world is your oyster. When it comes to the sexual markets, that is the case, right? Because you can be a guy that is, let's say, out of the sexual market, but consistently engaging with it, which is the guy that is saying hi to women, that is going on dates, that is asking women out in whatever way he can, using whatever skills or strategies that he has developed or is trying to develop. And you can go from being completely celibate and alone and technically out of the market to that night being deep in the market based on the decision of a single female, right? So, and it's not just roll the dice, complete random chance, right? It's, if I was to just roll up to random women on the street and just say the random first thing on my mind and have no structure or no understanding of what I'm trying to do or no understanding of what the female emotional process is like or whatever, then yeah, I could kind of, randomly stab in the dark kind of indefinitely and possibly get almost no results. So, this is why myself and other companies and other teachers over the years have developed systems, processes and ways to move through this so that we can improve our percentages, right? So that there are better and worse ways to start a conversation. There are better and worse ways to engage a woman and let her know that you have romantic intent for her. There are ways to ask her out on dates. There are types of actions on dates that are going to tend to be conducive to feeling more cozy and aroused than others, right? So yes, we want to learn specific skill sets, but it is ultimately comes down to a decision that this is an important thing to do for me to continually step into the market, right? For me to continually cold call, not again so that I have to do that every day for the rest of my life so I can get a girlfriend, right? So I can be dating, so I can have this Thursday where I'm going to spend some time with a lovely lady and see if we can get something happening. And when you do that enough, and enough is not years and years and years, enough is whatever it is, dozens or 100 attempts, then we can find ourselves very quickly in a situation where we have jacked or hacked or schmacked the sexual market, right? The one that says that everyone matches up with their exact level of attractiveness and level of muscles and money and whatever, and it filters down the line. I know for a fact that is not the case when we step outside of the sexual markets that are just kind of static, right? Okay, so within a subgroup or a social group, if no one's approaching anyone really and they only meet up in kind of social situations at a party or events or things that they're practicing together or studying together or whatever, and there's no movement in or out of that bubble of socially, then yeah, often people will kind of match up based on those metrics, right? That the cute couple will get together and the less cute couple will get together and so on. But when you are a man that understands that there are millions of these little social markets and that they do and can intersect, and we can step into other people's markets, and if we have something to offer which is actually inherently deeply valuable to the woman, then this is going to allow you to take steps up, right? It means that you can date outside your league. It means that you can end up with a woman that is more attractive than you and potentially has other options. I mean, attractive women always have other options, but that she can choose you because you emotionally arouse her, because you show good leadership, because you're fun to be around, because you treat her well but you're not a doormat, because you make her laugh, right? Like, because you fuck her extremely well. Take note on that. Like, there is so much margin for error that a man can have if he gives a woman deep sexual pleasure, because so many men, if not most of them, are not very good at sex. They either don't know, or they don't care, or they think they know, and they're sexually arrogant, and they're not willing to learn. So there are these different metrics, which we'll go into a bit more detail now, which can totally affect things. But again, it's really important to note that, okay, if I choose to bow out of this, the long-term effects of this are really brutal. I was at a conference just last week, actually, in Romania, speaking at one of these dating conferences. I haven't done that for a few years. And so I get to meet a lot of guys. There was 60 guys there, I think. And, in the breaks, having chats with people, coming up and asking me questions. And I got approached by two separate older gentlemen in their 60s. And they told me a bit about their stories. And they were kind of heartbreaking. There's one guy in particular who basically said, I've been coming to events like this for over 10 years. And I haven't gotten any better. And I've never been in a relationship, and he was in his 60s. He wasn't unattractive. He was fine. But he'd spent his entire life single and alone. And he had been coming to learn from people, but I just, he told me this, and I said, do you ask women out on dates? And he said, no. And I was like, do we need to continue this conversation? I mean, I think you know where I'm going with this. But it was brutal because he knew it as well, right? Like where it was like, the fact of the matter was, whether he had less or more advantages or he wasn't around women growing up or whatever, he had chosen the passive action of not taking the risk to go out into the markets and try and attempt to sell his wares. And so he's trying to learn all this theory, and he spent years in these kind of communities, gaining whatever conceptual concepts or some support or whatever, brotherhood or whatever he got from it. But what he wasn't getting was whatever that internal motivation was that would allow him to just go and ask somebody fucking out. And as a result, most of his life has passed alone. That stuff hurts when I hear it, because it's like because it's not like something which is, there's an earthquake in your city and it ruins your livelihood and it's an act of God and there's nothing we could have done about it. It's like a month, a year, a decade, a lifetime can pass and you can be stripped of and miss out on all of these human things. I was going to say wonderful, but they're not always wonderful, but it's like the truly human experiences that we do need, right? And anyone who's telling you that you don't need women and that you're better off without them, yeah, you're better off without some of them. Some of them are not good, but you're not better off without all of them. Perhaps there's like the odd exception of a person who is a real kind of, I don't know, asexual monk type, to whom, or who's like so devoted to their art or to their work or something where they get all their fulfillment from that and from their friends or something. But most men not. Most men need the warmth and embrace of a woman. They want to be cuddled. They want to be loved. They want to be kissed. They want to be encouraged and told they're cool and awesome. They want to be cooked for. They want to have someone who's bright and cheery chatting to them. They want to be able to go and do things with that partner, to experience the world and other people together and to be parts of, social communities and perhaps to build something together, or at least to be like side by side with somebody experiencing this period of our life together. And if that's from 23 to 27 or whatever time, and then there's a heartbreaking breakup, which can exhibit in all sorts of ways. It can be that people drift apart or someone cheats or someone's just falls out of love, or the facts of life just mean that it just won't work because someone needs to move to another country or whatever. Okay, so those things inevitably come as part of being, someone who is in the sexual markets, as being a guy who is exploring and growing and meeting and dating. Is that, yeah, it's not like I get the girl and then happily ever after, very, very uncommon, but it can be happily together for some amount of time, and then there's ways to kind of minimize the not fun bits at the end. And yeah, don't be naive and don't, marry a gold digger or, jump jump straight into relationships or have relationships creep up on you where you've lost control, or where you're at someone's beck and call, or where someone has control over your finances, or someone can leverage the law against you, right? Yeah, like all of those things can be worked around. You can just have a girlfriend and not move in and not share bills and not be considered de facto. You can be aware that a woman or a man can certainly cheat and move on to other partners, and that will happen to you probably at some point in your life, and it will be extraordinarily painful, and it can be really brutal, and then you will experience it as one of the things of being a man. Right? One of the integral experiences of life is loss and heartbreak and betrayal. We can't really avoid those things, or if we do avoid them, then we're left with this, what are we left with? It's like, okay, if I'm going to try and protect myself in every single way, I'm not going to take any risks so that no one can hurt me or lie to me or cheat or whatever, then okay, I'm isolated. Then I'm running around inside my own mind, and I'm not nourished by all of the other positive things that's going to come from, being with a woman. I'm really grateful to the women that I dated when I first started doing this. Like, when I think back, many of whom I would not date now, and I didn't, on metrics that I look at now, they weren't attractive enough or interesting enough or sexy enough or whatever for me to choose to be with them now. But at that point, it was really necessary for me to just get on any date that I could, any way that I could. That's the way I perceived it, because I need to get good at this interplay between the masculine and feminine. I need to understand the idiosyncrasies and the mechanics of leadership and of effective dating and of escalation and the types of conversation that seems to work better with women and so on. And I didn't think of it, even at that time, I didn't think of it like, I wasted this evening because I spent 3 hours or whatever with a woman that wasn't perfect for me and we didn't have sex. So therefore, that approach, that texting, that going on the date was all wasted time. No, I mean, you can think of it like practicing any craft. Okay, if you want to become good at anything, music, skiing, woodworking, coding, whatever, you have to put in lots of hours and practice, where during that period of time, you're not getting the end result, right? You can't play the symphony, and you can't ski down a black diamond run, and you can't write an AI code or whatever, but you are developing the skill set. And it's not only the skill set that you're learning all the other correlating aspects. You're learning coordination, you're learning concentration, you're learning problem solving, you're learning how to handle the very common frustrations that come up, especially at the beginning of learning something, where you may end up being frustrated half the time, a lot of the time, because you come up to the edge of your current limitations. And then we get to work with and play with, what does this mean for the way that I'm going to solve things? What kind of mindsets, what kind of ability do I have to pick myself up again and shake myself off and clear my mind and start again? Right? And in the mating and dating practice periods, just having face time one-on-one with a woman, and also socially, in social groups as well, but spending time where you are just being with a woman is in and of itself valuable, because for so many men, they have very limited hours of that. All right, it is hard to, if you've never spoken to a woman in your life, to roll up on the street and try to learn about what this creature is, this other species, in real time, whilst trying to be relaxed and cool and whilst trying to pick them up. Right? Okay, that's a lot to try and do in a single interaction. But when you get to, okay, you do that for a number of times until someone says yes, spending a couple of hours sipping tea, going for a walk, and asking her about herself and telling her about you, and trying to hold her hand, and seeing how she responds to your presence, and see how you can affect her mood by the way you affect your mood, by your vibe, by your relaxation, by the cadence of your speech. There is so much that you are learning by being in that situation. Stay tuned for part 2 of the sexual wealth gap, coming out tomorrow. And a very important announcement, which is that coming very soon, I'm going to be launching my Master Lover Toolkit, which is a 5-week program to make you literally the best that she's ever had. But you can get started straight away because right now I'm giving away a 40-minute module from the course, which is Sex Positions Masterclass. This detailed instructional video shows you all of the important sexual positions and most importantly, how to maneuver seamlessly between them and how to add different variants in your stroke control to make sure that you blow her mind in the bedroom. To take advantage of this, get your free module right now. Just click the link in the description, put your email in, you'll get it immediately. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Sexual Wealth Gap coming out tomorrow. This is James Marshall signing out. See you in the next one.